happy to have you on board and be able to talk to you today about your art process. I first encountered your work when I was in an exhibition at Quirky Fox, and I saw your work and I'm like, oh, who's this chick? She's really awesome. And I really like the standard of your painting and the concepts behind your work as well, because I just think like to have that narrative and the symbolism, and it's really rich with that. It's not just doing surrealism for the sake of it, but you're actually embedding a whole lot of storytelling, which I myself really like doing. I like having sort of stories in my work, and I always start with the story and then from there I build on that. So I get that sort of connection with your work through that manner, through that way of sort of exploring storytelling. Could you tell me a little bit about your background so we can know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, I'm Kiwi. I grew up in very remote hill country in New Zealand. Probably my whole childhood, most of my youth was very isolated. I'm actually quite envious of all these people that I've met since moving to Australia who went to daycare when they were like 1. And they've got some great social skills. My social skills are terrible. My friends were sheepdogs and sheep and deer and cattle.
So you're like a bit of a farm girl, were you?
I was. We're actually temporarily living in the country again at the moment, and I can't stand it. It's really weird. I loved where we lived when I was younger and didn't know that I was isolated because that was just my world. That's where we lived. But now I've lived in the city for like 18 years and I'm going back to it at the moment, and it's just, I'm not liking it at all. But so I was very isolated, but I felt like it was, despite having no social skills as an adult, it did give me a lot of room to explore my imagination. I sort of developed my own stories and things in my head. And
it gave you an opportunity to sit and think about stories and coming up with things yourself rather than being, entertain other people. You had to create your own fun, probably.
Yeah. My parents both worked. They were farming and then they were doing other things, other businesses. And my main caregiver was my Scottish granny, who was a wonderful storyteller. We used to sing together and draw together, and she used to tell me really funny old-fashioned stories, and she was wonderful. So I do think she was a major catalyst for my ability to think in story. Yeah.
Did she create work herself? Was she creative?
Professionally, she was an early childhood teacher originally, and she actually developed a whole lot of early childhood learning books and stuff back in the UK. She was really into nurturing minds and also super into animal welfare and wildlife. She used to illustrate the books she made with watercolour and ink. I remember running my fingers over those pictures in awe when I was a kid. Yeah.
So you got that creative sort of heritage from your grandmother.
Yeah, she passed away when I was about 20, 21. Before that, I went to high school in a bit more of a populated area. Went to art school after that for 3 years. Yeah, I don't feel like I was taught much at art school, but I feel like those 3 years.
I understand. I'm the same.
Yeah, it's like the 3 years were just, you could explore. I mean, I used to be in the studio at my little cubicle studio at art school from about 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The caretakers used to have to kick me out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so this is my isolationist thing. I get obsessed with stuff and I don't care about anything else that's going on. I just want to do that thing. Yeah, really into just working and exploring for hours and hours and hours at art school for 3 years. And that was, to me, that was what was great about it. I don't remember much about classes at all or what any of the teachers said about anything. I just remember I would have done it 7 days a week if I could get the keys off one of the tutors and come in on the weekend. I did that too. But
did you paint in the same way back at uni?
No, I actually, because I studied art history at high school. I had this most amazing art history teacher. Her name was Colleen Gallimore. Colleen, if you ever watched this, you're awesome. Her classes, they were small because not very many people pick art history, but she would make the classroom feel like you're in like a subversive French cafe in the 1910s or something. We'd have massive arguments and debates about all these concepts, and she'd join in. It was just so cool. It didn't feel like school. It was awesome. So I became really into early modernist stuff like expressionists and abstract expressionists later, like Rothko and Pollock. It's like Mike Rothko is still one of my all-time favorite artists. In art school, I was really into that abstract expressionist stuff. Yeah, I was doing color fields, not so much throwing paint like Pollock, but I was mixing paint with wax and creating big like waterfalls of thick stuff. And I had some pieces that were kind of like that. And then it was like a sister piece that was realist stuff, but it was very monotonal. And I was playing a lot with alkyd resins and like really thick stuff. So I was actually, at the time, I was really into this Kiwi artist who was actually born in Australia and he lives in Australia now, called Neil Fraser. He was doing really, really thick, rhythmically thrown paint works, which I really loved. He's doing incredible landscapes now in that same really thick paint. It's kind of awesome. Yeah, I was really into nothing like sort of super detailed, refined stuff that I'm doing now. It's very different.
How did you get to that? That's a big jump from doing things really like loose and, impulsive, sort of based on your intuition to the point of, okay, this is like highly refined, planned out work. Yeah. So what was that turning point?
I feel like I was an artist from a very young age because I had no reference point other than this huge sky and mountains, and I just was this being that created, whether I was digging holes or building things out of cardboard or drawing. Creating was what I did, and that sort of never faded. Always my identity was creating things. Actually, it's still one of my most favorite things in the entire world is just to create something from nothing, not painting, but just anything. I'll see something broken and I'll fix it, or I'll turn it into something else that didn't exist before. I still love that. I feel like when you grow up and you go through art school and you start learning about how to be an artist and the art world and all the intellectual side of it, I think I just cleaned right up my own ass at that point. It's like, okay, I'm throwing paint, I'm creating these really like shifting fields like Rothko, and I'm playing around with all that stuff. But what the hell am I saying with all this? Because it's all been said before. And I just thought, I can't tell stories with alkyd resin and wax, really. At least I didn't think I could. So I started with mainly stories about myself. Had a very complicated relationship with myself because I think of that isolation. I always had trouble with crippling self-doubt and all that lovely stuff.
So when you started photographing yourself, like when I want to talk about me, and then you were like, right, I'm going to start photographing. And is that where it sort of built for you?
Yeah, out of art school, I went completely the opposite way, photographing myself and painting myself, but in very specific poses that illustrated sort of a psychological foible of mine, something I was struggling with. I actually took that work, which was very new, and pounded the pavements in Auckland and got a solo show with it. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, like 2001 or 2000 or something. I had this like folio that I was carrying around. I got picked up by the Oedipus Rex Gallery in Auckland, which was amazing because it was like at the top of my list and I didn't think I'd get anywhere near getting picked up by it. So I had a show of that brand new work that was realism. It was, but it was very stylized realism. I studied photography at high school, and then I sort of minored it at art school as well. A huge part of my aesthetic is influenced by my work with photography.
Yeah, you can see that definitely through your whole process, your strong understanding of how, to photograph the subject matter and yourself. And that, like, that's sort of a question, I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit, but how do you actually photograph yourself so well? Like, I can photograph other things. I teach photography as a high school teacher, and I teach photography at school. But I'm like, it's one thing photographing someone else and pose, and then there's another thing actually photographing yourself, because it's not like you can see yourself in the lens.
It's quite tricky. So early on, it was just very hit and miss because I would just set up a camera on a tripod. I had an old film Canon SLR that I used at high school. So I was using that, and I didn't use flashes back then either. It was all very primitive. You have to guess because there's no digital screen to look at whether you've actually got your stuff. So I just, through bunches of rolls of film, thinking that I was kind of in the frame. I would look through the viewfinder and sort of, in my mind, I'd go, okay, so that's the area where I'll stand, like in reference to things on the wall. And I'd go and stand there and I'd just set the self-timer and I'd just let it take lots of shots and I'd kind of move and do different poses. But now I use a Panasonic Lumix G9, which is unbelievably awesome. It's really little, though, too.
That's a vision on the where you can see the display on the back of the camera?
Yeah. So it's got that, and also the little display swings out and pivots around so that you can actually see yourself when you're looking down the lens. So that makes a big difference. So if you get a camera with a swivel screen, which, a lot of the good SLRs have now, you can actually see yourself. Also with that camera, I can plug in an HDMI cable into a screen. So I've got a second screen mounted above my studio machine. and I can hook that up so I can actually see a huge version of what the camera's seeing. So that's the way you get around actually seeing your framing and everything. Now it's a lot easier. I've done a lot of professional photography for the last 25 years, so I've collected a lot of gear. I've got a lot of soft boxes, which are big like tents made of nylon with a semi-opaque white nylon front, and you put your flash inside it and it fires out a really nice diffuse burst of light. I've got two big ones of those, and a beauty dish, which is like a big round bowl, really, painted white inside, and the flash goes inside that, and it's got a little smaller round plate that the flash bounces off and then light disperses around the bowl and out. So that creates a really, really nice lighting on the skin, on the face. So I tend to use all three of those things and position them at different angles to get the lighting look really good on the props that I'm using, to set the tone. I've got different coloured backdrops, and of course I can change that in post. So I can change that afterwards, but sometimes I'll have a particular coloured background that I want to use for a particular concept. If I've got that colour, I'll put it up. If not, I'll approximate and then tweak it later. Yeah, if you've got the right gear and you mess around with it for a while, it's really taken years and years of not just shooting myself, but shooting clients to really understand the angles and the lighting and what you can do with it. I also make weird things that I can put flashes inside. Like I've got this tube, it's like an old medaling tube that I painted white on the inside and black on the outside. You can shove the flash in one end, and it's got this big long nose, and then it's got a lid from an old supplement jar, cut like a letterbox shape out of it, like a little slit. Yeah. Put that on the end, and the flash fires this flash of light, which is really kind of cool if you want to do something dramatic.
You're going to highlight something,
Yeah, if you want to light up just one part of it and have the rest relatively dark. Doing stuff like that's really cool. You can make stuff, improvise stuff, particularly if you're using flashes. This is the thing. I get really anxious when I paint if I don't have everything the way I want it before I start.
Oh, you've got your reference image already and perfect.
All the detail is done in my mind and then in pre-production. I take all my photos, I find all my other little references that I might need, and I pull it all together on the computer, and it takes me weeks to just tweak and play with it and color grade it the way that I want. Then I take that and I'll put it on my iPad and draw into it and Procreate and tweak things. And so by the time I'm actually painting, I just get to listen to my audiobook and relax and just like paint by numbers.
Thrown out. But I think that's what a lot of people don't realise is that when they purchase one of your works, it's not like I'm just doing a painting. Like you're doing that whole lead up process from concept to, nutting it out, your research, you're taking photographs, you're editing that, on the computer or on your iPad, doing that even before you actually start painting. So it's a whole investment of time that people often don't realise.
And people often ask me how long the painting took, and I generally log it because it's based on how many audiobooks I've listened to and the length of them. So I know how long each painting took to paint, and I'll tell them. I was like 120 hours, 150 hours. But then I'm not telling them about what it took to actually create that world and that scene before I even started painting.
I was also looking at, I can't remember the name of it, the one you did with the bird and it had the water tower in the background and the bird had a little helmet on it. And then you crafted the actual helmet. You physically made the prop, and I can see behind him, but all these props there. But you actually made the little bird helmet from, a whole range of processes. I'm like, far out. That's a whole other level on top. Like, what made you start wanting to create props like that, and what was the process for creating the little helmet of the bird?
I've always thought better in 3D. It's weird. Like I'm really good at building things. I love carpentry, and I love I've got a 3D printer which I got back in 2020, and I'm just obsessed with it. Luckily we have solar panels where we are at the moment, so I'm not killing the planet by using it. Often when I think of something that's part of the story that I want to tell, I want to make it first so that I can see all the way around it, so that I can know it. So either I 3D design it, or put that together with found objects, modeling clay, or appropriated stuff that I can cut up. It's an act of familiarizing an idea by making the intangible tangible. And often when a world or a story comes into mind, it's not going to be just one painting. So I feel like if I make something that's going to be a key element in those stories or in that world, then I'll reuse it, because photography is such a big part of it for me, creating those scenes and the lighting the way I want. If I've got that element that's really crucial to the story, I can photograph it and get this beautiful lighting that I want for every work.
Is there any reason why you would create the prop? Was it mainly the lighting that you creating that prop and enjoying the process of creating 3D elements, rather than going, I'm just going to type this into AI and then it just spurt an image out and then I can just go and stick it with something else? Like, you could do it that way.
Well, you know, honestly, I played with AI. I'm fascinated with it. It's equally terrifying and amazing. I've played with it. It cannot do the shit that comes out of my brain.
Yes.
If I say create this scene and I'll describe it extremely detailedly, no. It can't do anything.
It's not inside your head.
No, it's not. And also what I'm realizing is that, and fair enough, it learns off things that exist. The things inside my head don't really exist. So when I describe something to it, all the reference points it has are things that it's already seen. And it just can't. I've tried multiple different platforms to see if it can do what my brain and all of my tactile processes and photography and stuff can do, and it just can't. So
the clarity's not
there either. Like,
no, you're photographing
something that's real. You've got the lighting, you've got the depth and all that, and the clarity of the image. It just does not compare when you're typing something into, Mid-Journey, for instance. It's going to be a low resolution image, and often it does weird things, like you might have 6 fingers on your hand, like it just all
and things like
that. So I probably will get to a stage where it will be a lot better, but I just, it doesn't compare. And I think it probably adds to the quality of your work too, the fact that you are handcrafting things and then they merge into this whole world that you create through a painting.
Yeah, I do feel like I build myself this little bubble. I'm like an eccentric recluse from the story that lives in this little room with all these trinkets everywhere. Actually, I saw a really awesome photo of Stephen Irons, I think his name is. He's a sculptor from Melbourne who makes stuff out of found objects. And he was sitting in this room and he was just lit with this beautiful lighting, and he was surrounded by like half pieces of dolls and broken wheels. I feel like I'm like that. I'm in my cave and I'm surrounded with all of this stuff that is just intrinsic to my world, and my paintings just end up coming out of that bubble, that weird reclusive tinkerer bubble.
Yeah. And do you sort of, like, what are your thoughts about, I don't want to go into much of this rabbit hole and just touch upon it, but what are your thoughts about AI and how that's affecting the art world?
I think the worst aspect of it is people's art being used to train without permission. That's awful. People spend lifetimes developing their style. That's the scariest part of it, I think. I know everyone's very scared of the fact that, if AI starts creating really good art, then people aren't going to buy art. I don't actually believe that. I think people who collect art want something made by a human. They want to feel connection. Often collecting anything, whether you're obsessed with music and you collect all the records of an artist that you like, or whether you collect paintings in a genre or by a particular artist that you love, they need connection. And I think people who pay money for something creative is because that piece is always going to give them a feeling of connection with the person that created that. You don't get that if it's created by a machine. And the people that might really like an artist but can't afford it or will never be able to afford it, they can go ahead and make an AI thing and put it on their wall that looks kind of similar. But the people who collect art, that do pay for art, are going to want to keep paying for art, human art. That's quite belief.
Yeah. I never get like overly worried, because you can't replace the human brain and human emotions. So like you and I are very much into storytelling. Yeah, you can get, ChatGPT to formulate a story, but is it really going to connect with someone? And at the core of it, it's the story that's coming out through the painting. Yeah. And you can't get that through AI. It's not going to produce it to that same level.
Yeah. So that whole thing about a story that comes from a human, that's something that matters, that's come from a consciousness, that really means something to that person that they felt compelled to express. When I came out of art school, I was doing self-portraits and stuff like that. I was still doing them in a way that I thought might appeal to galleries, that might be saleable, that might be what other people wanted. I spent probably the first 15 years of my professional career thinking like that, and I had a torrid relationship with painting. I quit multiple times. I had multiple years off. I never had any consistency to what I was doing because I was constantly stressed about what should I be doing, what should I be painting. And then I think it was about 2016, and I'd had about 3 or 4 years off painting. I was like, man, why aren't I painting? I'm really bloody good at it. Why do I hate it so much? Because I honestly had this horrendous love-hate relationship with it, because I loved the ability to create and to create something in 2 dimensions that had a sense of space and like this magic, really. And so I thought it was really cool. But when I actually sat down to do it, so much doubt and self-flagellation about, am I doing the right thing all the time? Are people going to like this? In 2016, I just stopped thinking like that. The first painting I did when I changed the way I thought about that was me side-on with the monocular, big steampunk type monocular up there.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first one I did where I just thought, I'm going to paint what I want to paint and everyone else in the world be damned. I was never happy with my work before then. I was doing it for other people's reasons, for what I thought was the right thing for the market or the right thing for a gallery or whatever. But I never liked any of it. I never felt proud of any of it. I never felt like it met my expectations. But when I started doing just the stuff that meant something to me, because I had this image in my mind and I wanted to create it, that changed everything for me. And that work that I'm doing now with that ethos, it sells, and I don't know why, but I think it's because it's authentic. Finally,
yes,
it's authentic.
Yes, and it's you. Like if you're talking about branding and things like that, because it's authentic and comes from you, it's got your fingerprint on it, and then people resonate with that because it's unique.
Yeah, I do think that if you really want to connect with your subject, with whatever it is that you want to put out there, it's got to come from a place where it's really something that you want to do. It just made such a difference to me to let go of caring about what anyone in any part of the industry or whatever would think. It was huge.
Yeah, because I think you can get caught up with, oh, this gallery has this style of artwork and then I've got to make something to fit in with that style of gallery. But really, you just have to stand strong and go, well, no, if I'm going to be doing this as a long-term thing, not just quick fix, I just want to make some cash, like I actually have to do something that I'm happy with that's going to be part of me. So, that's a really good piece of advice for people, is to stick with and work out who you are as an artist.
Yeah, and if someone gives you some advice or you ask someone for advice because you want advice and someone says something that you think makes you excited or makes you like, oh, cool, yeah, I'll try that. That's awesome. Like it makes you feel like it's something you want to try, then you do that. Take that advice or whatever, but do it in your own way. Do it in a way that's yours. Don't do it in a way that's where you're trying to do it like the other person. You can get a lot of unsolicited advice in the art world. Just ignore it. Unless you actively want it, ignore it. I think the best way to find yourself as an artist and find your style is to just work, put your head down and let the things that make you happy or inspired or excited or interested come out, because nobody else can tell you to do that. It's in you, and focus on getting that out.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, honestly, that's when I started having galleries approach me rather than the other way around, was when I stopped trying to do what I thought galleries wanted. It's so back to front, but it's
the irony of the situation, trying to fit in with them, and I was like, no, I'm going to stop doing that, and then that like magnetized towards what you're doing. Just in terms of surrealism today, contemporary surrealism, how do you think that has changed over the years? How would you say it's different from the past?
The original surrealists, a lot of their stuff was influenced by the surge of psychoanalysis stuff that was going on at the time, like Freud, and the world was very bleak at that point because of the Great War, and everything was a bit difficult and dark, and there was a lot of struggle. I think they weren't happy with reality and they wanted everyone else to feel how everything wasn't as it seemed. They wanted to lift the curtain on the state of the world, and did that in a very sort of disturbing and confronting way. I think surrealism now has a much broader scope in terms of what it can be used to achieve. Particularly its narrative potential. It's not just to disturb and to shock and to make you feel weird in the brain. It's about what can be achieved for reality by using things outside reality and bringing them together. I think it's a great tool for social issues and ecological issues, which is what I use it for a lot. When you take something that has an aspect of the real, but you bring something into it that makes you question that real and that reality.
So what are some of the stories that you tell through your art pieces?
Most of them are an internal, external reflection dialogue. To me, all my life I've had some very difficult health struggles, and I use the turmoil and experiences that I have with having a very active and vigorous and strong mind stuck in a fragile and vulnerable body that lets me down a lot and, tries to kill me quite often. So we have a bit of a psychological battle with my body. It's my friend and I try and be nice to it, but it's also my nemesis.
See your painting behind the heart. Yeah. Is that connected to that sort of?
Oh yeah, it all is. Sometimes I feel like just ripping everything apart. Just stop trying to kill me, please. I've got a bunch of little different series, but Little Canary on its own in various urban environments or dystopian environments. That's the new little series that I'm doing. But most of my work up to that point has been self-portraiture. So each one is usually dealing with a unique aspect of my struggles and also the way that they mirror societies or the planet's struggles. There's always this complex interplay between a sense of vulnerability or fragility and a sense of strength and freedom. It's a very complex sort of dynamic. It's sort of really always to do with the psychological battles between the reality of what you're facing and the potential of what you can do despite that.
Do you find that you start an idea for a painting, it will be that internal struggle that you have that you want to express out, or do you sometimes look outward? Like, do you read about things? Like, are there other aspects that enter your idea making?
Yeah, I mean, I play a lot of video games and I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. Like, I used to voraciously read with my eyeballs, and now when I'm painting, I read with my ears. I honestly can't paint without listening to an audiobook. It keeps my anxious mind distracted and just lets my eyes and my brain and my hands communicate. I do listen to a lot of stuff that's about characters who are dismissed or broken, figuring out what they can do and where they can find their strength. I listen to a lot of dystopian world stuff and sci-fi stuff where the Earth has been ruined the way we're ruining it, but it's got to its end point and it's barely uninhabitable, and how humanity may exist or not exist anymore and in what form and what's recoverable and points of no return and all that sort of stuff. Because that's something I think about as much as I think about my really annoying or pervasive health issues, is the state of the world and what we're doing to it, and it really stresses me out. And, as an individual, there's not a lot you can do. You do what you can do, but I feel like telling stories about it because it really matters to me and mixing that in with the internal stuff that matters to me.
Well, you've been something in the creation of your work by telling stories and, reaching people at an emotive level. You are still helping spread the word about environmental decay.
Yeah, I probably do more that way, even though, maybe only 50 people will see it, but it's probably better than putting all the recycling in the bin that just never gets recycled because Australia's shit about it. You can really try, but there's not a lot you really can do as an individual. But I do feel like if somebody looks at one of my paintings and thinks about what I'm trying to say, maybe that makes a difference. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's the age-old question, one person at a time, you can change things. And then people seeing your artwork, because it's not something that's just so literal, and you have created this world and created something that's a little bit different, people are going to start looking into that deeper and actually, affecting the way that they think, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I do like to think that I can make people think. Because, like you say, I'm not very literal. I like being a little esoteric about my concepts, but I don't like to make them so esoteric that people are like, I have no idea what this means.
Oh, yes, it's so arty that it's just... Yeah.
There's ways in to the concept. I want to always have little roots in that different people might be able to find because of their own experiences. But I do like to think that when I bring the elements together, it will trigger a particular type of thought about a particular type of thing.
Yes, definitely. Just in terms of the way that you work. Now, I know you mentioned to me that you paint on aluminium, and I have seen a couple of artists do that. I have no idea how you do that or why you would choose that medium, totally left of field for me. Do you think you could share a little bit about why you decided to use that as a substrate and what difference in terms of working with that?
Neuroses, really. That's why I chose to work on it. The more detailed my brain wanted my work to become, the more annoyed I got with canvas. Even the really fine grain stuff just irritates the hell out of me. I didn't know much about aluminium at all until about the 2016 time when I started to stop caring about what people thought. I was initially painting on canvas. In my mind, when I first heard on aluminium, it was like a piece of sheet metal. I don't know if there's other people out there that don't really know what it's like. So it's basically polyethylene material in the middle. That's the black stuff, sandwiched between two thin coated sheets of aluminium. Initially, it was designed for printing on, sign writing printing. Typically on one side, there'll be a surface that's designed for printing on. Some of the more expensive ones will have it on both sides, but others will have a thinner, duller coating on one side. But it's always the side with a thicker, shiny coating that you want to paint on. It's really tough. It's slightly flexible. It doesn't have any issues with humidity, mold, warping, anything like that. So it's super inert and really stable. You think because it's so smooth that adhesion wouldn't be very good. So I did heaps of experiments when I started. Some people were already painting on it at that point. So I thought, well, it can't be terrible. And some people gesso it first, but I actually did so many experiments that I realized I didn't need to. There was really no difference for me between a light sand and straight on with oils versus a light sand and then gesso and straight on with oils. And to me, the gesso was annoying because there was brush strokes. I love it because there's very minimal prep work. At the other end of the process, you have to mount it some way. So canvas, once you've stretched it, you can paint the edges or not or whatever and just hang it. It's easy at the end, or you can frame it. But this, you have to finish it somehow because you can't really just give people this flimsy little thin piece of stuff. For the first few years I was using it because I come from a stretch canvas background and I never particularly at that time liked the float frame type finishing for gallery canvases. I really liked the gallery edges, just the straight, raw, stretched edges painted or not. I got some like angle aluminium extrusion, like long pieces of like right angle aluminium, and I would glue all the way around my piece. I would glue them with JB Weld, it's called. It's a special metal glue. I'd send the coating back on the back and I would glue these edges all the way around so that when you look at the front of the painting and the sides of the painting, it actually looked like it was canvas. Like you could paint around the edge. Then I got tired of doing that and I just liquid nailed some plywood pieces onto the back that I could then screw a float frame into. So I kind of got into the float frame thing and now I'm doing that. But the aluminium extrusion around the edges that mimicked gallery edge stretch canvas worked quite well as well.
Is the sanding so things will stick? Because I noticed you said that you sand the front of it.
Just very lightly with like really fine grain, very quickly, not very thoroughly. I don't use a sander, I just do it by hand. And just to very slightly rough it up a little bit with like 1200 grit or something. Just with my hand, I just do this on it. The adhesion is really quite awesome, even though it looks so slippery, because it is designed to take printing inks. It's great, particularly once the oil paint's cured. I don't know what it's like with acrylic because I hate acrylic and I've never used it. I mean, I used it once, that's why I hate it. It's wonderful, and the level of detail that you can get with it is just like a gazillion times better than canvas. The only issue that peeves me a little bit with it is it's actually a little bit static. So if you do your day's painting and everything's a little bit wet and then you go to sleep, come back the next morning, it's like every particle of dust in the entire room will have settled on top of it. And the paint's not quite cured, so like I can't brush it off. My paint doesn't take very long to dry, so I give it like 24, 48 hours before I spray varnish it, and I'll so carefully for like half an hour go over the entire thing and sweep every little speck of dust off. I'll go to varnish it and I'll give it a coat and it looks great. Give it another coat. I'm like, where did that come from? We had a very funny conversation at the opening of a recent show that I was in. Everyone was worried about the dust in their paintings, and none of us could see the dust in each other's paintings. We could only see the dust in our own paintings. Funny. So it's just like a personality. If you see dust in your own work, it's terrible. But if you see someone else's work, you don't notice the dust. It's really funny.
I had a bad scenario once where I did a painting and I just rushed the varnishing, and there's like big hairs in the middle of like white sections of painting, and I took it to the frame. He's like, yeah, I think you need to be a bit better with your varnishing. I was like, oh, okay. So I took it home and then wiped it back with some terps. And as I was wiping the varnish off, I started wiping the painting off.
Oh my God, that's my worst nightmare. That happens, isn't it? I really don't think there's any artist out there who hasn't had some terrible varnishing experience.
Yes.
Really, like, gut-wrenchingly anxiety-making, horrible varnish experience.
Oh. Where do you buy your aluminium from?
I get mine from just a random guy that I found on eBay. He's at Cooper's Plains in Brisbane. He just runs a little importing company. Technically what this is called, if anyone's looking to find it, search for ACM or aluminium composite material. Okay. That's how you find it. If you don't want to buy the art stuff, which don't buy because it's way too expensive. This is exactly the same stuff. But if you get it from like a sign owning supplier or a construction supplier, it's way cheaper to get. A lot of them will cut it for you too. Like if you can't fit a gigantic 2 meters by 1 meter seam on your roof, they'll cut it in half for you so you can fit it in your car. But the cool thing about this too is it's rigid, it's really strong, and you think, how on earth do I cut this? Do I need a circular saw or something? You don't. You just need a good ruler, a table edge, a craft knife. I use carbide blades in my knife. I mark my line and then I score it about 10 times. And with the knife, you can get through the top surface of the aluminium. Then you chuck it on the table. You put your hand on one side and a hand on the other side of the cut and just weight it and it'll just snap and then you just hinge it a little bit and it'll come off. So it's actually quite easy to work with. It seems daunting at first, but it's actually not that difficult to cut your piece. And
I know that there's a whole range of, linen, canvas, if you're doing birchwood, like how does it compare in terms of pricing?
If you want to buy a really good canvas and get it stretched on really good timber that's not going to warp, this is way cheaper.
Yeah.
I mean, you can buy it for a lot more than I buy it. But if I buy a full sheet, which I think is about 2.4 by 1.2 or something, that normally costs me around $80. Yeah. And I can get multiple paintings out of that. And then the only expense really is just whatever you decide to mount it with. I use now plywood strips and then make a float frame or get a frame made that can screw into that plywood on the back, or whether you decide to mount it with the aluminium extrusion for the clean edges like I used to. Again, that's not very expensive either. When I do a painting about that size, the plywood and the glue and the screws and the supplies that I use to make the frame with, all of that only costs about $50. It's very cost effective. You can spend a lot of money on a really good canvas with a fine grain and having it stretched for you or whatever. So I think it's very good cost-wise.
Yeah, and it's probably better to post as well overseas or whatever.
Yep.
That's why I like birchwood, because it's like solid.
Yeah, but even if your stretcher is really solid, there's that huge vulnerable bit in the middle if anything pierces them. I do like sending these off knowing that that's not going to happen. I do tend to put a little sheet of custom wood or something over the face of the painting so it can't get scratched or anything.
What sort of paints do you use to paint with?
Art Spectrum are my favourite. I do have a lot of other random brands. I even have some tubes that I still got from art school. I used to love My Mary paints, the Italian ones.
Oh, yes. I talked to Carla Grace and she uses My Mary Puro paint.
They were just super affordable back then. I used to get the big tubes and they were just half the price of anything else. And I've never had any problems with like fastness or performance or anything. So they're actually quite good if you're on a budget. I'm not sure where you get them here. I used to get them in Christchurch in New Zealand. But yeah, I love Art Spectrum. Their colours are awesome. I love the way that they not only have a lot of the traditional colours that you kind of want to go to as an artist, but they make their own colours. There's a lot of Australian influence colours. They're just really good quality and not horribly expensive.
Do you use a medium with your paints?
I do, yeah. I've got a really good system. My work is very fast drying because I hate having to wait for things to dry. I hate areas of my work being so that I can't touch them. That really bothers me. So I actually use this stuff. Okay. Odorless lean medium. It's essentially an alkyd-based product. I have like a little supplement cap that I pour a little bit into every day. It's got some dried stuff in there now. And I just keep it beside my palette. And every time I'm mixing a colour, I'll just dip the brush in once and mix that. And it's a tiny bit makes a massive difference because I don't paint very thickly. Everything I do one day will dry overnight so I can work into it if I want to. I'm relatively one path with my work too. I'm not into glazes and layers and all that stuff. I do only work back into stuff if I think something needs more definition or more detail or tonal adjustments. Yeah, so this is my grail. I can't do without it. The other one that I can't do without is the National Art Materials Retouch Varnish.
Okay, yes.
I actually use it as a finishing varnish, which you're not supposed to do, but I do. I put like 10 coats of this stuff on as a finishing varnish because this is the only varnish that doesn't scare the shit out of me.
Do you have any tips though when you're starting there spraying away? You're like, oh no, sort of. I suppose you have to be a certain distance. It seems to be okay when you put it on.
Oh no! I mean, I've been using spray paint since I was like 6.
Okay.
The things my parents gave me, I had a soldering iron when I was 8 and leaded solder, and they'd leave me alone in my bedroom with it. Yeah, so I've been using spray paints for like a really long time, and I've got some good art spray cans as well. So I don't know how easy it is to use a spray varnish for someone who's not super used to using sprays, but for me, because I am super used to using it, I just find it super easy. I've created so many more varnishing disasters with a brush. It's actually the only varnish that I've never ever screwed anything up with. It's just super, super chill. Like it just goes on there and it just plays nicely with everything, and except for maybe the dust, but that's not.
Maybe I'll have to convert to that.
I've had one too many issues.
Yeah, and the awesome thing about this is that you can use it as you go. You know, sometimes blacks go a bit meh until you varnish them.
Yes, yeah, that's why I have to varnish because of the dark backgrounds.
Yeah, well, you can use this as you go. As long as your work is touch dry, you can use it to deepen the colours and so that you can actually see what's going on, and then just carry on painting over top of it. Yeah, that's why it's called retouch varnish rather than finishing varnish, even though I use it for finishing varnish.
Yes, because I have to sit there and wait for my painting dry because I use water-based oil. It takes so long.
Yeah.
And then I'll go, okay, now I've got to add some time to put the varnish on. And so many times I'm like, slightly tacky. And I'm dropping it off to a gallery somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different way of doing it. Do you have a set colour palette? I assume you would.
It depends on the work and on the series a lot of the time. I often have a lot of metallic and gold elements in my work. I want that sort of aged metal effect, something that looks like it's been around for a while. I have a lot of colours that I can use to imitate that, sort of nice oranges, umbers. My favourite yellow in the entire world that I don't think very many people know about and don't paint with because it's actually really hard to find. It's called bismuth yellow. I'll go get it.
Okay.
It's basically, because canaries are like a really primary device in pretty much all my work.
Yes.
This is it. This is bismuth yellow. I don't know if it's going to focus.
I've never even had that yellow.
So it's basically like a permanent yellow light, sort of hue, but unlike permanent yellow light, it's ridiculously opaque. So when I used to do canaries with permanent yellow light, I would have to do layer after layer after layer of yellow to actually get that real luminous sense of yellow. But this stuff is just awesome. It's almost fluoro. So, I mean, I often mix it with Art Spectrum's Spectrum Orange, which is very nice for a sort of a canary-ish yellowy orange variegation. But yeah, I love this. If I had to choose a favourite colour, it would be bismuth yellow because it means I only have to do one coat of yellow.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
It's really good. Yeah, and that's Winsor & Newton because Art Spectrum don't do bismuth yellow. Actually, a lot of oil brands don't do it. It's quite hard to find. I got it on Amazon from the States because it's so hard to find in Australia.
Okay. What sort of mistakes do you see people making in paintings, and what sort of advice would you give people to improve the quality of their paintings?
I was waiting for this question. I don't see anyone making any mistakes. That's what I'd say. You can't make mistakes. Just work. Just figure things out. Just experiment. If you feel like you've stuffed something up, sure, let it go. But you haven't stuffed it up. You've learned something. There are no mistakes. I really think there are no mistakes.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's encouraging for anyone who's sort of, it doesn't matter what stage they're in. I think the mistake is not to paint.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I spent a lot of time doing that. I spent a lot of time not painting because I was worried about stuffing things up because it wasn't going to be what I thought people would like. I just stopped worrying about making mistakes. You just don't worry about making mistakes.
Yeah. What advice would you give for anyone who's an emerging artist? What sort of advice in terms of getting their work out there or pursuing that as, I suppose, a career or?
I think probably the biggest one is what we've already talked about. Whatever you're doing, do it for you. Whatever your concepts you're wanting to express it because it means something to you and because it's important to you and because you have something to say. Don't do what you think other people want you to say. If you have something to say, say it as you would say it. Yeah, don't think too much about what you should be doing. If should comes into your brain, oh, I really should be doing it that way, or I really should be doing something on this subject, or like this person's work. Stop. Yeah. That's my biggest advice, because honestly, everything started to go right for me. I mean, it's hard work doing the work, but I didn't have to work super hard at the other aspects of being an artist as in engaging with people, because people started finding my work. I just think things start to work well for you if you can find something super authentic to say and say it without external noise getting in the way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, that you're working out who you are and then presenting that to the world, and then out of that people are attracted to stuff that's authentic. Galleries as well, the fact that they've started searching you out.
It's I don't know, it's something beyond words that people can tell from your work, I think, where you've come from when you've painted it. You're not trying to be something that you're not, or you're not trying to say something that you don't really believe in.
I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me.
Thanks for offering to speak to me.
Your knowledge of painting and the way that you create your ideas and the way that you integrate all your different skills in terms of sculpting and photography and combining that into your painting process. I think that's a really refreshing way of looking at painting.
Lots of refreshing's nice. I normally think weird, but it's nice that you think it's refreshing. So thank you.
I love it. I love stuff that's a little bit left of center. So it really appeals to me. I suppose that's why, trying to search out artists to interview, I was instantly thought of your name, because I just thought, I'm just really interested in the way that you work. So it's been really good.
Thanks. Yeah, cool.